The lunch rush was in full swing when Emma, a kind-hearted waitress known for her warm smile, hurried from table to table, balancing plates and customer complaints. She had worked at the small-town diner for years, treating every guest like family. But that afternoon, everything changed. A spilled drink, a rude customer, and a misunderstanding spiraled out of control. Within minutes, the entire restaurant fell silent as the furious owner shouted at Emma, accusing her of being careless. The sound of his voice cut through the room, sharp and cold. Everyone watched as he fired her on the spots right there, in front of customers and coworkers who didn't dare say a word. Emma stood frozen, her hands trembling as she tried to explain, but no one listened. Her eyes glistened with tears as she slowly removed her apron, the humiliation sinking deeper than she could bear. Just as she turned to leave, a small voice broke through the heavy silence. A little boy sitting with his mother spoke up, his innocent words carrying more truth and courage than any adult in the room. What he said made everyone stop in moments later. The owner's anger melted into something completely unexpected. That single sentence from a child would change everything, transforming shame into realization, and turning a cruel public firing into a moment no one would ever forget. But what did that little boy say that brought the owner to tears? Stay tuned to find out. The diner had always been Emma's second home. She'd started working there 5 years ago, right after her husband passed away, doing double shifts to support her young daughter Lily. Every customer knew her by name, and many came just to see her cheerful spirit brighten their day. But lately, things had changed. The new owner, Mr. Carson, was nothing like the kind old man who'd hired her. He was strict, impatient, and obsessed with keeping things perfect. Even the smallest mistake felt like a crime under his watch. That day had already been tough. The kitchen was short-staffed, and orders kept piling up. When Emma accidentally mixed up 2 tables' drinks, it set off a chain reaction. One of the customers complained loudly, and Mr. Carson stormed out from behind the counter, his face red with frustration. He didn't ask what happened, he just assumed. The whole diner froze as he scolded her in front of everyone, saying she was careless and unprofessional. Emma's heart pounded as whispers spread across the room. At a corner table, a little boy watched everything. He had been eating quietly with his mother, but his curious eyes never left Emma's face. He saw the way her hands shook, the way she tried to hold back her tears, and something in him stirred. He tugged at his mother's sleeve, whispering something that made her look up, startled. A moment later, the boy stood on his chair, ready to say the words that would stop everyone in their tracks. The boy's small voice cut through the silence. "You shouldn't yell at her," he said, his tone trembling but firm. "She was just trying to help." Everyone turned toward him, Mr. Carson, the customers, even Emma, who froze mid. The mother tried to pull him back into his seat, embarrassed, but he shook his head. "My dad says people make mistakes when they care too much," he continued softly. "She looks like she cares a lot." His words hung in the air like a weight no one could ignore. Mr. Carson's expression hardened at first. He didn't like being challenged, especially by a child, but for some reason he couldn't look away. Behind his stern face, something flickered, maybe guilt, maybe recognition. The other customers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what to say. Emma stood quietly, her eyes glistening, torn between gratitude and humiliation. In the back corner, Emma's coworker Jake, who had always admired her quiet strength, clenched his fists. He'd seen how unfairly she'd been treated for weeks, but never had the courage to speak up. Now, watching that little boy stand up for her, he felt something shift inside him. The other waitresses whispered among themselves, wondering if the owner would finally realize how harsh she'd been. The air in the diner felt heavy, like a storm waiting to break. Mr. Carson's jaw tightened as he glanced at the boy. Then at Emma, for the first time. Doubt crept into his eyes, but his pride wouldn't let him show it. The diner went completely still. You could hear the hum of the old ceiling fan and the faint clatter of a spoon hitting a cup. Mr. Carson's hand tightened around the edge of the counter as he stared at the little boy. His face softened for a second, then hardened again, as if he was fighting an unseen battle inside himself. Emma stood there, still holding the tray. She hadn't had a chance to put down, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know whether to thank the boy or tell him to sit back down before things got worse. The mother looked uneasy, whispering for her son to sit quietly. But the boy wouldn't. "You shouldn't fire her," he said again, louder this time. "She smiled at me when I dropped my ice cream. She made me feel better." The simple honesty in his voice made everyone in the diner shift uncomfortably. A few customers nodded slowly, murmuring their agreement. Even Jake stepped forward, his voice trembling as he said, "He's right, Mr. Carson. Emma didn't do anything wrong." The owner's eyes darted from one face to another. The authority he always carried seemed to waver. For the first time, he realized the entire diner was watching him, not with fear, but with quiet judgment. His breathing quickened as he looked back at Emma, who stood silently, her eyes filled not with anger, but exhaustion. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone. And then, the little boy said one more thing, something that would shatter the wall Mr. Carson had built around his heart. The little boy looked straight at Mr. Carson and said softly, "You sound just like the man who yelled at my mom before she lost her job." The words hit the room like a lightning strike. Emma froze, her heart aching at the sound of the boy's trembling voice. His mother's face turned pale as she tried to hush him, but he kept speaking, his small hands gripping the edge of the table. She cried just like the waitress is crying now. And that man said sorry, too late. Mr. Carson's breath caught in his throat. The customers exchanged shocked glances, sensing the pain behind the child's words. Emma's eyes widened, realizing this wasn't just about her anymore, it was about something deeper. The boy's mother finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. We used to live in another town. I worked for a small company until my boss made a mistake and blamed me for it. I lost everything overnight. She looked down, her voice cracking. He looked a lot like you, sir. The air grew thick, charged with tension and emotion. Mr. Carson's grip on the counter loosened, his knuckles white. He tried to respond but no words came out. The image of his own past flashed before him, his brother, a man who'd once been unfairly fired, never recovering from the humiliation. Suddenly, the truth of his own actions hit him like a mirror reflecting all his mistakes. Emma stood silently, watching him struggle between guilt and pride as everyone waited to see what he'd do next. Mr. Carson stood frozen, his mind racing as the boy's words echoed in his ears. The room seemed to close in on him, the quiet stares, the heavy silence, and Emma's tear-streaked face, all pressing against his chest. He finally stepped forward, his voice breaking. Emma, I was wrong. His eyes glistened as he looked around the diner. I let my anger speak instead of my heart. The crowd stayed silent, waiting. Emma's hands trembled as she tried to speak, but no words came. For a moment it felt like time had stopped.